Welcome to the Revenue Builders Podcast, a weekly show featuring B2B sales leaders and executives. Hosted by five-time CRO John McMahon and Force Management co-founder John Kaplan, the show goes behind the scenes with the people who have been there, done that, and seen the results. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe, rate, and review the show to help us reach more people. Revenue Builders is brought to you by Force Management. We help companies improve sales performance, executing the growth strategy at the point of sale. Find us at forcemanagement.com. Enjoy today's episode.
So, Kara, let's start with some of the most common conversations that you find yourself in, or common topics that you find yourself in when you're, talking to executives today.
So I would say it depends on the executive, obviously, and I coach across all different markets and skill levels and experience levels. But what I would offer is that one thing that comes up in coaching sessions is just a conscious approach to how they're leading or what's going on or what their challenges are. So the thing about coaching is it's so personal. I'm not coming in with any agenda other than to listen to the person and to talk about what's getting in your way, what are your big challenges. And I'm fortunate enough to really work with high achievers. I think sometimes people think of coaching as remedial, and I think coaching is actually an accelerant to growth and to opportunity. And from what I've seen in it's been about 6 years, is that people, when they pause, can be really thoughtful and break through things that they just haven't had time to think about. Particularly in sales, we're so execution focused. We're so sort of activity and execution, day, month, quarter, whatever the hot topic was at the e-staff meeting. And when you can get somebody to pause and think about their team, their market, their organization, their personal goals, and set goals, and then keep up on them, right? Check in with accountability, I think, is the other really big piece of coaching. There's a conscious leadership part, and then there's an accountability piece where I'm going to ask them what they've done since our last conversation, and they're going to be expected to talk about what they've achieved or not, and what got in their way. So I would say, to answer your question explicitly, themes that have come up. With me, it's interesting because I'm a working mom. When I'm coaching female executives, it's a lot about trade-offs and integrating their life and prioritization. And I had a session with somebody last week, and it's sort of what's everything in your life you can outsource so that you are spending time on only what's important to you. And I would say one other thing that's unique about how I coach is everyone I work with has gotten some feedback, whether it's in a structured program or through a 360 that they might have done. And to process feedback is actually really powerful also, because they don't have to take it, right? They can throw it out the window, or they can decide that it's really valuable. And I would say that sometimes going through, it's a little bit of a self-audit. How do you want to show up? How are you showing up? What's that gap? What do you want to do about it? Can also be a really effective and interesting part of coaching.
It's funny the way you say that, because what I find in talking to people that utilize coaches or speak to the coaches themselves, it really begins with, like, they either know themselves or they don't.
Right.
I find the most elite people on the planet, the most effective people, the happiest people, the people with the best relationships, they know their story, and they've owned their story. So they've actually emotionally and intellectually connected with their own story. And I think one of the things coaches do really, really well is they help people get there. But most people, I want to talk to you about execution. I can do this. And then they also want to get to a point where they say, Kara, just tell me what to do.
That does happen.
That's a problem. But that first one, when you say, like, you're trying, because I think that's where the cornerstone of learning comes from. Because if you If you don't understand your own story, you have
Yeah.
zero chance of being able to help anybody else, whether you're leading, coaching, anything.
I think you're right. And I find that there's an honesty and a vulnerability that comes up in coaching because it's just me and them.
Yeah.
There's no performative aspect. There's no people will say to me, how can I be successful in coaching? I'm like, just be honest.
Yeah.
Just tell me what's really going on. It's like our friend JR, right? JR knows his story
big time
better than most people I've ever encountered. So raw, so honest, so accountable. And I think that you're right about sometimes they don't want to hear it or they don't want to own it. In a coaching space, you really have nothing to lose, right? Because we can decide what we need to work on, and everything's sort of optional or up to you. I'm not their boss. I'm not their board member, and I'm really not there to judge. I'm just there to support and help them. I think that's a very unique space professionally. And I think particularly at sort of the doing a new job for the first time, and then at the very senior level, because you both know what it's like when you're very senior, you're supposed to have all the answers. Everybody's coming to you. One of the CEOs I worked with said, my job is just to make decisions all day and to make decisions on limited information, right? So there's that piece. And then there's the people that just haven't done something before. And I think in both of these spaces, just having someone to talk through their goals, their challenges, their thought process, getting feedback, beating things down is really, really helpful and helps them get to know themselves and build that story.
I want to go back to something that you said, Kara, which is coaching is personal. So we have sometimes I've seen a lot of first line, second line managers, they haven't led before.
Yeah.
And they really treat their people all the same, like they're cookie cutter. They don't really look at them as different individuals with different strengths, weaknesses, skills, knowledge, characteristics. Can you talk to that a little bit of how, a first or second line manager that has a team, what's the best way for them to go ahead and see them as separate individuals instead of being all the same?
I think you might laugh at my answer, but I think a lot of it has to do with listening and not telling. When people ask me, how have you grown as a coach? I'm like, I'm just a much better listener than I ever was as a head of sales or an executive or even a frontline manager. And I think that the best people in management, especially when they're new, they just ask a lot of questions and they get curious. And I think it's not a do things my way or one way for everyone, but they're just sort of like, oh, why do you do it that way? Or how might that go? Or there's a lot of asking questions versus sort of dictating. And it's not natural because at least the first line managers that I maybe worked with or have coached, they're holding on to the reins so tight because they don't want to fail. Oh, you guys will love this. When I moved to Toronto. So I went DC, San Francisco, Toronto, Boston, and I'm still in Boston. But when I went San Francisco, Toronto was the biggest sort of career jump in my life. And I was new to Canada. I didn't know anyone. It was my birth country, but I had never really lived there. And about 8 months into my tenure, I was a sales director. I had maybe 80 people. And I did a 360. And in my feedback from my 360, apparently I had said, like, I didn't move to Canada to fail. Like, way to get your team on board, Kara. It was really kind of selfish, I think, and reflected how tightly I was holding on to that vision of success as the defining component of my move and my risk. Whereas I think with some maturity and some time, you realize what you want is each individual person on their journey, feeling the wind at their back, feeling supported, feeling seen, understood, supported, motivated, and clear on what their expectations are. And I think one of the things that's so hard with these individual contributor roles or that first team you have of maybe 7 or 10 people is everyone is going to do things a little bit different. And you sort of need to turn the dial on each person by observing and coaching. And like my dad, the football coach, didn't give me a ton of advice as a sales leader, but one thing he did say was catch people doing things right. He said, so often we come in with people who are coaching on everything you're doing wrong. Give them some attention and let them know you see what they're doing that they probably think no one else is seeing. And I think to your point, John, it's a lot to manage, but not everybody is the same. And the more you can listen and learn each person, I do really think the more successful you'll be.
Well, you see a lot of first-line managers that want to coach, but then they don't know what to coach because they have a hard time assessing the individual, and the individual has a hard time with self-reflection of trying to understand what they're doing right or wrong. So it's almost a little bit like you have the blind leading the blind.
Yeah.
Sometimes
because the manager has to self-reflect. They have to understand how they come off with the person. They have to then assess the person to understand, of the 5 things that I could coach, what should I coach first, and then second, third, fourth, fifth.
I think you're right. And I think there's a nice thread in sort of a team meeting environment where you can just sort of make that known as one of the sort of pillars of your leadership style. I think one thing that gets lost sometimes is just like, what should I expect from you as my manager? And I'll often say to people when I'm coaching them, well, what does your manager expect from you? What does good look like? What does success look like? And sometimes people just don't know. They're so focused on the numbers or the metrics and as if that's the only criteria they're going to look at. And I just think sometimes to offer the conversation can be really helpful, just to give people a sense of, here's what I see, here's what we're going to work on, here's what you can expect from me. The strongest managers, I think, bring that to the table.
I think people also underestimate the mental change that a great individual contributor goes through to become a beginning leader. So for me, somebody put it well for me, and I really struggled with it. It said, you've lost your opportunity to think about yourself first.
Yeah.
And I thrived in an environment where I could think about myself first as an individual contributor. I thrived.
How did you do as a parent, Cap?
Well, I had a great partner. So, I mean, I had just an unbelievable partner in that regard. That's a whole podcast there. But for me, the thinking about yourself, there's a couple of tenets. Thinking about yourself second was hard.
Or last.
Or last. Creating space for another individual to come to their own learning was extremely hard for me. Extremely hard. How I grew up. Well,
creating space for someone else to come for them to learn it in their own way.
Yes. And meeting them wherever they are and be able to create space for them to figure it out. So like nobody ever, for me, I like to say that there is, people rarely argue with their own conclusions. And I think the greatest leaders figure that out. Like if you come to your own conclusion and I help you come to that conclusion, that's hard though, man. It takes the ability to create a space for another human being, for them to go through the gyrations of trying, failing, listening, not listening, and helping a person. That was hard for me. Really hard for me because I grew up in athletics. I watched film and they said, that's wrong. This is right. Watch it over again. Watch it over again. I didn't get a lot of time out. I got time on the practice field to do it right or wrong. But when you're in a game, you do it right or you do it wrong. And the accountability is you're out. Like if you miss a play, you're out and you come out. And so that was hard for me to like create space for another individual and allow them to come to their own conclusion about what they needed to change. And then the last one for me was this concept of protect and serve. Like protect the company, serve the individual. That was hard for me as well because I leaned one way or the other sometimes. I noticed I was really serving my people and I wasn't protecting the company. Or I leaned on really protecting the company and protecting the processes, protecting what I wanted to happen. And I really wasn't serving the people. And that balance of protect and serve, those were 3 hard ones for me.
How did you, in the protect and serve, I think that people very much evolve in that space and they get really good guidance sort of over time. Were there any insights that you gained or tools that helped you kind of nail that?
One big one for me was always connect with the why of what I was asking them to do.
Yeah, I love that.
And always think about the why of what the feedback was. So if I think about why a company is asking us to do something, and I take the time to be able to translate that to another human being, why is this important from everybody's point of view? And if I can't figure that out, then I'm probably not doing the right thing. We got to get rid of it, because if it's not important and everybody's up in arms about it, then we got to get rid of it. And then from the other side, I wasn't really used to, I didn't come from an environment where you could sit around and yitch around and, complain about stuff and, sit around the water cooler. So that was kind of an offense to me. But when I said to myself, why are they saying, knowing who I am, why are they saying this to me? What are they actually saying? When I could insert that why first, it was pretty reflective. But I got to be honest with you, I'm 61. I struggled with it, and I still probably have area of opportunity. If I'm like, why is this person saying this to me? Are they jacking me up? Are they, right? What is the reason? And then normally just being authentic with somebody and saying, hey, you normally don't speak about the company that way. What's going on for you? And it helped me be more authentic to say, okay, it's hitting me strange. Instead of reacting to it, I know it has nothing to do with me. It has more to do with them. Let me just find out what's going on for them. That wasn't easy for me. That wasn't easy for me.
No.
That was like, what are you complaining about? We all got to do it. What the fudge, I
know. Well, I'm laughing a little bit too at what you said, because so many of your observations about the mental changes, there are parallels between those, that growth, and then also as a parent or a spouse, right? Not thinking of yourself first, letting people draw conclusions in their own way or get to their own idea or making something their own idea. These things also just take patience and listening. And I think people often will ask me, now that you've coached after having a long run as an executive or a leader, how are you different? And I'll always say, I'm just a much better listener than I ever was on the front line. And the patience that I think comes from being able to zoom out a little bit. And as a coach, having seen how many ways there are to do things, right? Because I really worked at 3 companies primarily, but then as a coach or an advisor, you realize it's a beautiful thing, the way people can kind of pause and think about something differently than you might have. And I think to your points, there's a real maturity and a strength that can come from that mental shift and that growth.
Yeah, I think it's a mindset. So when people used to tell me, hey, John, I want to get promoted, from sales rep to first line manager, I'd say, do you have any kids? And they'd say, yeah, I got 2. I go, why do you want 5 more?
Right.
And they go, what do you mean? I go, can you remember back when you were single? And they say, yes. Okay. It was all about you. When you got up, when you went to bed, what you ate, what you did on the weekends is all about you. Then you got married and had kids. Who was it about then? It was about the kids, when they got up, when they went to bed, what they ate, what their sports were. It wasn't about you anymore. And anybody that's had multiple kids understands that they grew up in the same household, same parents, and they're completely different with completely different strengths and weaknesses. And until you can put that hat on and say, essentially, the only way I'm going to succeed is if these people that are working for me succeed first, then you have the wrong mentality.
You really do.
I like that. And when you guys are talking about this listening theme, I think you Johnny, you taught me for years, just by your own, you're one of the best listeners that I've ever experienced. You don't do that as much as with me anymore as you used to. So I need to get you back. I
try to rile you up now.
Yeah, I need to get back to that. But in all seriousness, and what I learned in watching people like John, and I think Grant Wilson's also a great listener, my co-founder at partner at Force Management. What I found is it's a lot of times it's a confidence. When you're confident in your content, when you are confident in what you stand for and what you're trying to accomplish, and you've simplified that in a very, very unique way, it's easier to listen to people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think they also help you too. Like, so Johnny, like if you go on a sales call and I come out of a sales call, I even did this, with my son or somebody with sports. You come out, you say, how do you think it went? Really good people will go towards the negative aspects of what went down, right? And then you get to say, well, geez, I don't think you really did that bad on those three things. If there was one area you were going to work on, what do you think you would work on? And then they actually know themselves almost better than you do. And they say, this is the area I think I should work on it. And if they feel that strongly about it, now you get to inspire them and coach them to achieve those, that skill or that knowledge, right? But most people that are really good and really want to be someone and go somewhere, they're pretty hard on themselves. And all you have to do is ask a question. You're going to get the answer. And then you get to be the good guy. Like, hey, you really did good in these aspects. If you want to work on this one thing, I'll help you.
I like that. What
I like about that.
No, please go, Kara.
No, it reminds me when, it comes up often in coaching when I'm coaching people that are newly going to be presenting to the board. It's threatening and they're not sure what to expect and so on. And I said, well, can you get somebody in the room? I did this when I was doing QBRs early on in my early days. I had someone in the room sort of take notes and give me feedback, because you almost black out sometimes after you've given a big presentation or tried to really be on for a certain amount of time. And I think to your points about being able to sort of be self-aware and reflect on a big meeting or a presentation, I think it can also be really helpful to just have somebody in the room. And you might even say, I'm working on my ums and ahs, or I'm really working on my slides, and I'd be curious if you can see where people were engaged or not, or I'm trying to make this point, can you let me know if it comes across? That level of feedback, especially because you've asked for it in advance, can be really powerful in terms of accelerated growth and understanding.
I think there's, I feel like it goes in a circle where you coach, like you get them to volunteer what they need to work on. You get to coach them on that. You get to inspire them that they can get there. Mm-hmm. And then you get to inspect, and you get to coach, you get to inspire, and you get to inspect. But to your earlier point, too many people only inspect. They're only going after the numbers, but they haven't got the person to buy into them yet. Why? Because they feel like it's, when you're only inspecting, then it's only about you as the manager or the leader. Mm-hmm. If you're helping me with the one thing that I'm trying to work on, and you're coaching me and developing me and you're inspiring me, now it's a lot easier to inspect me. That's how I feel about it.
I like that.
Another great tip, I think, for leaders out there listening is that every now and then, I think you have to model the behavior that you are using with your people. So like what I try to do is I'll do like at Force Management, I'll do a sales call with a seller, and we'll get off the phone and I'll say, okay, give me 2 things you like about what we just did there. And I drove the call, let's say. Give me 2 things you like about what we just did and 2 things that, that you would do differently. And I got to tell you, almost 100% of the time, which also tells me a little bit about how I present to people. Like maybe I must not look like I want the feedback, but they always start with, oh, it was so wonderful. I don't know what else I would change. It was just so great. And I make them tell me something. Yeah. 2 things I'm doing. The first thing I'm doing is I'm learning, because they had different ears on than I did when I was driving, and then they were listening. And then the second thing that I'm doing is I want to see if they get it. Like, I want to see if they get, like, because I'll know some of the mistakes I made. Mm-hmm. And I want to see if they get, like, this is how we operate together. This is what I'm going to do with you. And so great things happen out of that. I have actually had one time I had to call a customer back because my team said, hey, dude, they had this objection and she brought it up 3 times and you blew it off. Like, I'm sure she's thinking that we can't do that. And I'm like, oh, my God, you're right. And I had to call them back. What a great opportunity. I called the customer back and said, hey, Okay, when you brought that pricing up 3 times, and I wasn't trying to avoid it. I knew that I was calling you from the economic buyer, and we were handling the pricing with them. I'm sorry, let me handle your pricing concerns. But so that was a great opportunity. I learned from it. But leaders today, you shouldn't ever stop doing that. If you're a CEO and you give a presentation, you should ask your people, and then you should also model that back with them. And it creates an open and trustful operating rhythm. Does that make sense?
It does to me. And I think that feedback obviously plays a huge part in coaching. But I think just having the mindset that I want to know, please tell me in any line, right? Manager, VP, executive, whatever, customer to seller. So when I was a brand new sales rep, this was in my Oracle days, I really was learning like what's a database, what's rack. I didn't study any of that stuff. I found 3 customers and I developed great relationships with them, and I'd go to a training. And when I got out of the training, I would call. I still remember my guy, Eugene. He was in Bend, Oregon. I'd be like, hey, Eugene, they told me that rack will blah, blah, blah with your backup. Like, do you believe that? And he was like, well, kind of. Well, and I would trust and verify what I was learning and training with these 3 customers. And it built, as you guys were saying earlier, built my confidence.
Yeah.
So that when I was really, trying to sell in a little bit of a colder environment, I believed what I was saying because it had been validated elsewhere. And I think that was really powerful in the early days.
I like that.
What about social styles? Like understanding your social style and the social style of the person that you're talking to. Meaning, like if you're an amiable, analytical, or driver or expressive, and let's say you're a driver, and you're trying to deal with somebody that's an analytical. I mean, you have to understand that as a leader, or even if you just calling on customers to understand, like, how am I going to be able to rubber band myself, for lack of better terms, over to their style.
And again, as a coach, as in a managerial environment, being able to say to one of your team members who's a really strong driver, hey, are you listening to how they're responding to you? Right? They're giving you short answers, or your tone is coming on really strong. They're much quieter, whatever, helping them to pick up those cues can make a really long-standing impression. And I think can be really impactful, but it takes time.
Do you find that a lot of the people you coach know where they sit?
See, that's a big one. Yeah, that's a big one.
I coach a lot of people who know their strengths finders. At many companies, that seems to be a really good tool. What I find interesting with people is how they choose to apply it and how it fits in their company culture. There's one company I've coached a ton in, and they've done a lot of sort of awareness training, reinforcement training, manager boot camps. I find that at bigger companies, when there's a structured approach to sort of understanding and interpretation, it's actually really helpful. And then I coach at startups, and it's just all hands on deck. Priorities might vary week to week. They're solving really big challenges. We're talking a lot more about things like time and energy and hiring, and it's, much more tactical. But I do think that, to your point, the self-awareness period is super important in any kind of manager or leadership role, because you can describe how to best to work with you or what's important to you and build connection and trust very early on.
I see.
Why do you think people are such bad listeners?
I think it's for all different reasons. I think sometimes it's ego, sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's anxiety. Sometimes they just want to get their point across. Sometimes it's a sense of urgency. I think it's a lot of different reasons, but I don't think we're generally in a sort of high-tech, high-achievement sales organization, which is where I think we all were raised. We're just not really taught the value of listening unless it's to a customer, and we think we're going to maybe get something out of that in a way.
I also think, like, when you're a first-time manager, even maybe second-time manager, it takes you a while to figure out that you don't have to be the answer man.
That. Mm-hmm.
To build some confidence when people come and ask you something and say, I don't know.
I love that.
Let's go find out. Or sometimes I've said, people come in, they need a decision. They say, and I say, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when are you going to know? I say, I don't know. Maybe when I'm driving home. Maybe when I'm on a run. Maybe when I'm in the shower. I don't know. But until my brain connects with my gut, I can't make a decision. And right now it's not connecting. But it took me a long time to gain that type of confidence to be able to say, we don't have to make a decision right now. And I'm not going to make a decision right now until I really feel like my gut matches my brain. And when is that going to happen? I have no idea, because the intuition talks to you at different times.
That's for sure.
And also, like you said, if you can't be here in the moment, then you can't be a good listener. And if you can't be here in the moment and be a good listener, you can't, use your intuition. And too many people are not here. They're in what I call a constant state of partial attention.
Yeah.
They got texts and emails and people coming in and out and dropping envelopes on their desk and all that type of stuff. And they're never really paying attention. So that's why they're poor listeners, because they're not here.
Yeah.
And the goal, I think, of human behavior is to be, we've talked about this before, Johnny, on these podcasts. The goal of human behavior is to be on the side of being interested more than being on the side of being interesting. And I think that sellers, leaders, people just get it wrong. Like, the more interested you are lasts so much longer in human behavior than how interesting you are. But the world doesn't tell us that. The world tells us you got to be interesting. You got to be able to tell stories. There's all kinds of training out there to, tell a story on a whiteboard and blah, blah, blah. And, that was one that was a little bit difficult for me. It was almost like being in a curious mind.
You're so interesting, Cap.
Well, it's a curious mind versus a performing mind.
It's so true.
And the curious mind wins in business. In life, the curious mind wins versus the performing. So true.
Mind. I was recently coaching somebody, and he was really struggling with connecting at office events. They were just kind of really overwhelming, and he wasn't sure what he had in common with people. And I said, just ask questions. Don't worry about having to say one thing about yourself. And his homework that week, he had 2 events, was just to go and ask questions. And he said it relieved him of all the pressure. Like, what am I going to talk about? He said, I just had to listen and ask people questions about whatever they were talking about. Made entering a conversation easier. It made connecting easier. And now I feel like I really know people I never knew before. I think that's a good nugget.
I do too. And if you've ever been led by somebody that spends more time being interesting versus being interested, you know exactly what that feels like. And I'm not saying it's like negative and somebody's just being like highfalutin or whatever, but it tends to be kind of one-sided. It's, and that does not make for good learning and good leadership.
No, it makes for a really fun dinner party sometimes, but that's probably it.
Right. Or people default to that because they're like, you see that you could walk into a dinner party. You walk into a dinner party and you just observe 99% of the people are in the mode of trying to be interesting.
Yeah.
And then the person, sometimes I do this and I try to be interested, and it's so odd for people. I've actually had people at a dinner party what are you writing a book? And I'm like, I've actually had that happen to me before. And I'm thinking about, I'm in this building right now in Marco Island, Florida. The last time that happened to me, we were at some event here and I'm sitting there asking somebody questions about their family and blah, blah. And the woman actually looked at me. She said, what are you writing a book?
I know people will say, are you interviewing me?
No, yeah. Well, she said, I guess the way I was doing it was offensive to her, but I was just like, no, I was just kind of interested in your story. And then honestly, my wife was there and I just got up and left.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm done.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, Kara, can we talk about the balance that a leader needs to have in order to do their job well? I mean, when you're in sales, you're running really hard. You have 90 days, you got to produce a bigger number. When you really count it down, it's about 62 days that you really have when you subtract out weekends and holidays.
Oh, that's painful.
And it's pretty easy for leaders to, and I've seen it many times, to lose their balance. And I've always said to them, if you can't take care of you, then nobody else is going to take care of you. And people are counting on you to take care of you so you could make good decisions for them as a leader. Can you talk about how it's best for people to try to maintain a balance?
Oh, I think balance it's a challenging word, which I'm sure you hear all over the place. And what we often focus on are sort of habits. And I think that it's all about your values. So one thing that I've learned a lot in my evolution and my pivots is just living in line with my values is when I'm most productive and happiest. And that's not always a popular decision. That sometimes means disappointing people or having to leave positions or make changes. But I think people get the most energy from good habits and living in line with their values. So I'm always, when I first start working with somebody, just taking inventory. What's important to them? Are they doing the things that are important to them? What does their life look like outside of work? And like you said, how are they taking care of themselves? Sometimes people are starting from a great point. There's so much more awareness now, like you said, about sort of balance or integration or whatever it might be. But sometimes they're just all over the place and they're in a constant response mode. Like my boss needs this, my family needs this. And they don't have good habits with either sleep or exercise or wellness, and they just haven't really thought about it. So I think it's individualized, and I think it's a lot about what's most important to you. Like I was somebody who, I'm a really big morning person, but I'm like a battery. Like I wake up fully charged and then I slowly lose steam. And at 9:30, I'm lights out. That's just how I operate. I think, again, back to the point of self-awareness and knowing yourself and how you operate best. I was morning exerciser, early morning meetings, never doing email in the morning, big calls, big meetings when I'm really at my best. And really, no one should expect anything from me late at night. My husband's the exact opposite. He sort of hits he can get on the treadmill and run for 2 hours at 9 p.m. We're very different that way, but he can optimize for him. I can optimize for me. And we just have to stay in communication. I think for leaders, they got to do their personal inventory, build the habits in a way that supports their system, and communicate with the people around them so they can get the best from them. If that makes sense?
Yeah, it's so easy to lose yourself in the grind, though, because the mind says, well, I can do these 10 things over here that I know I have to do, or I could go work out, or I could do these 10 things over here, or I could just quickly eat a cheeseburger or something,
well, I think
pizza, and keep doing those things. Your mind has a funny way of pulling you back to the, like what you're really comfortable doing all the time. And it's really hard to say, let's go exercise, let's eat right, take the time.
And why do you want to
take care of you?
Right? How's your energy? How are you showing up at work? How's your communication, your patience, your ability to listen? Like I was coaching a woman during COVID whose kids were being homeschooled, and her office was on the 3rd floor of her house so that she had space and quiet, but she didn't have a beverage fridge up there. She didn't have any food. So she'd go the whole day and be completely out of gas. So we just, set her up in a way where she had a walking pad under her desk. She brought up seltzers and water and kept them next to her desk. She on Mondays stocked her fridge like she would downstairs. And so she could get her work done, but also to feel good and move her body and get some fresh air. That's what worked for her. I think that it's really easy to make excuses, but if you're clear on your why and what's important to you, I used to never see my kids in the morning. I'll go to like a 5 a.m. boot camp and then go right to the office. People thought I was crazy. But to me, that's how I felt. I was okay to not see my kids in the morning. It wasn't great, but like they just got up and had breakfast and went to school. I was able to maintain my energy levels and my fitness and my focus at work. Everyone's different. I think every day is going to be a little bit different, but you have to know what's important to you.
I think you talked about inventories. I find that balance is, it's different for everybody. So I like to ask the question, what are you balancing?
Oh, I love that.
Everybody's balancing different things. And I think at the end of the day, life is a series of trade-offs. You have to make sure you're not trading the wrong things, and only you can decide that. So once you identify what you're balancing, it's so much easier to be purposeful in your life.
Yeah.
Right? Like at the beginning of the week saying, okay, I am balancing being a man of faith, a husband, a father, a wealth creator. There's like 7 roles that I have in my life. And it's so much easier for me to, okay, those are the things typically, those are the levers that I'm pulling. That's what life puts me in. And so I look at the beginning of the week and I say, okay, if I could do one thing and only one thing in that role that week, if I only had one choice to be a better dad, if I only had one choice to be a better wealth creator for my family or better leader, whatever, man, I found that that's been so much easier.
I think that's really powerful. It sounds like a coaching session.
Yeah. So much easier.
When you have someone asking you that, like you're asking yourself that, a lot of people won't have that conversation unless they say, I got to talk to Kara at 11 o'clock on Wednesday and tell her what's my one thing for each of my categories this week. And then it sort of makes you do it in a more conscious way. I love that process that you have.
Yeah.
I used to just ask myself, why are you doing what you're doing? As if somebody else asked me that. Like, let's say they came into the room and said, why are you doing what you're doing right now? I'd have to have a pretty good answer, right? So I used to ask myself that all the time. And then driving home, I'd say to myself, what did you accomplish today? You did a lot of stuff, a lot of activities, but did you really accomplish anything? And those are hard questions to ask yourself all the time.
I find with people who are particularly self-critical, if I ask them, what were you proud of this week? We actually do this in a family circle on Friday nights with my kids. We do what was hard for you this week and what are you most proud of? And just to have a minute to think, what am I proud of today? Right? Because it gets more in line with your values and your behaviors and not just achievements, both of which obviously are important. And I'm laughing, John, because I think there were times when I'd be like, why am I writing this email for this rep? Why can't they write it themselves?
Right.
Things that just suck your time and feel important at some point, I guess.
Or what you're talking yourself out of.
Right.
Maybe this isn't a good example, but every time I work out and then I walk towards my cold plunge, which is 30 feet away, the negative person comes up in my head. Hey, John, you already did it 3 times this week. You don't need to do it again. Hey, John, those 3 minutes in the cold plunge, you could use them the 3 minutes to get out the door quicker. I mean, that negative person who's in everybody's head, you have to turn that person off. Because it's always easier to take the comfort zone, right?
It's also easier to do a cold plunge in Florida than in Boston. I'll just say that.
Maybe it depends upon the temperature.
It does. One thing that's interesting here is as I'm listening, some great advice that I've gotten and I probably listened to more than I'm older now. I wish I would have listened to when I was younger. 2 things. If it doesn't bring you joy, get rid of it.
Yeah. And
I find a lot of older people, a lot of people that are on the back end of their careers or what have you, they have an easier time doing that because we have choices. We have more resources and we have choices. It seems like it's easier for people our ages to do that. And then the other one, but I wish I had done it earlier. And then the other one was, this is a big one for me. Find the things that give you energy.
Yes.
And craft your job or your life around those things that give you energy. If I had listened to that earlier in my life, I don't know how much different my life would have been, but I guarantee you I would have been feeling a lot more fulfilled. But then there's also this balance of knowing that psychologically, doing hard things that we don't want to do actually make us incredibly efficient. Like Johnny talks about the cold plunge. Yeah. The data on the cold plunge is that there's not anybody in the world that likes doing that. Oh. But a massive response in the human brain that says, I did something that I didn't want to do and I feel great about it. So there's that conflicting a little bit, but I wish that I had taken that advice a little bit earlier. Is if it doesn't bring you joy, get rid of it. And if it, craft your job and your life to those things that give you energy. Those are always people that are
younger kids. that advice is harder.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes you need to grit your way through some of those early roles. And that is doing the hard thing, right? There's cold calling, cold emailing, learning new solutions, learning a methodology, figuring out how to forecast. That's so hard, but it's building muscle and resilience and pride in yourself when you do it well.
Yeah, I agree.
You know where my cold plunge is in my backyard, Cap. You're welcome to use it anytime.
So's mine, dude. Who got you? Who no, you actually turned me on. Wait, this is a true story. You got to
talk to Cap about when he's docking a boat.
Kara, he sent me a book. There's a difference between Mac and I. He sent me a book, and I'm Gadget Man. So he sent me a book on Wim Hof, the cold plunge guru.
Yeah.
Who bought the first cold plunge, Johnny?
You did.
Yeah, and how like a year or two before you, brother.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. So
a late convert. I didn't expect that.
No, Johnny's an early convert because he sent me the book. He sent me the book. But, I think this topic of shaping things, you just brought up something kind of important to me, Kara, which is like different times in life. And maybe one thing, there's people that are listening to this, and I want them to like, is there any advice that you give on like pivots in life or milestones in life, or it's different for everybody, but kind of managing those pivots and milestones? Anything you've learned by your own experience and coaching others through those pivots?
So personally, I am a risk taker. As I said earlier, I've moved. I worked at a big company where it was really hard to differentiate yourself. So I moved to Canada. I mean, no one was doing that. And I think that, it's again, getting back to what are your values and what's important to you. I was somebody who was achievement oriented, and I wanted to create wealth for my family and experience life in different ways. And that meant to me, first in my early career, it was moving. And then, I've pivoted my career now 3 times. And to me, that brings excitement and fulfillment and curiosity and new networks of people and challenges. And I'm very motivated by the learning and the growth and the exposure. For some people, they want to maybe grow a career at a big company and sort of follow a path. And that's admirable and high quality as well. I think it's really important to get grounded just in what's important to you. Again, where do you get your energy? How do you feel on Sundays about Monday? I think that's a great test. Are you living in line with your values, right?
Sunday scaries.
Yeah. I don't have those. And I'm fairly proud to say that when I did maybe feel that way, it was like, okay, it's time to do something. And I did personally work with a coach for 10 years. I had the same coach. And that person was really pivotal in my acknowledgement of kind of what was going on in my gut and where I was feeling either challenged or unfulfilled or nervous, apprehensive, just kind of like what's going on and how do you want to sort through it? And so I think for people to just be honest about where they're maybe feeling a call or a pull, or some sense of, I don't know, something unsettling, to just listen to that. And whether it's a coach or your buddy or your grandpa or your golf friends or your yoga partner, just to say, hey, like, I don't know, there's some stuff going on here. And to sort of sort through it versus just let it sit. I would just say to activate and nurture those ideas or those thoughts and see if there's something you might want to do about it.
Johnny, what
about Johnny and I've run into lots of people that are very coachable. They listen to what you have to say and they say, yeah, and they ask questions and they want to know more. And over time you help them, you send them to training, you help to train them, but they don't adapt. And that's always confused me because I'm not a psychologist or anything to figure out like, what is it inside them that doesn't allow them, that wants to be coached, maybe they're playing me, maybe they're playing the game and stuff, but they never make that jump to actually adapt and make the change.
I mean, I think there's probably a number of more questions there to figure out, because people will say to me, have you ever worked with people who are uncoachable? It's like I can count on one hand of the, I don't know, 100 people I've coached, people who really couldn't get there. And typically it's just that they've not been honest about what's really going on. They've just gone through emotions or done what other people expected of them. But that's a sort of a much larger conversation. For people that would be open enough with you, I wonder what their challenge is.
What do you think is the greatest human motivator?
I mean, fear.
Right. Yeah. Fear and then greed, right? Yeah.
I think so.
I think that's high.
But fear could be, I'm sorry, Johnny, just one thing. So fear could be used in two ways, right? I mean, it could really stop people in their tracks, or, I mean, especially early in my career, I had a huge fear of failure. So that was a real giant motivator for me. It allowed me to actually bust through my fears so I wouldn't fail. But I think for some people, it can also stop them dead in their tracks also.
Yeah, I did. So I've only done one sort of professional coaching certification, and it was at the neuroscience of leadership, and it's brain-based coaching, and it's really all about how you react, and then how to work through that physical state, and how to break down problems and work through them. So you're exactly right.
I think motivators, when you say that, I think that's personal, because our experience, our lives create experiences that creates like little protectors inside of us, and those become motivators. And so we have fear parts. We got parts of us that are trying to mask some fear. We got parts of us that are trying to mask, like, in my case, I was actually deemed uncoachable in college, Kara. So
I think you shared that in the training.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not proud of it, but when I really think about what was my disposition during that time, I had an inner part that was saying, you don't freaking know me. So you're going to try to coach me, but you have no idea what I've been through. You don't know me. And so for me, a motivator, that totally turned around when a guy named Ed Schmidt came into my life at, Bowling Green, and basically took the time to, understand me and make me understand myself, but also make me very accountable. Like, okay, we can go through this exercise, but like, you got to change. And if you don't change, and that's all it took. That's all it took for that part.
Respond really well to the accountability.
Yeah.
And if people know what's expected of them, and then they feel you're invested and they know you're going to ask about it, I think that cycle can be really effective. And when it's not, it's a great conversation about why not. Like, some of my best coaching sessions are when people haven't done their homework. And I'm like, well, okay, so what happened?
Yeah.
Right? What got in your way? Those conversations are really powerful.
But if that guy didn't come to your rescue, so to speak, Johnny, you would have been deemed, Johnny thinks he's special. And then that's a formula for get him off the team.
I was on my way out, Johnny. That's a true story. I was on my way out, not proud of it, was on my way out. A highly touted recruit was on my way out. And
that's not uncommon, though.
Yeah.
I think in college sports.
Yeah.
Especially in the recruitment process, when you're sold so hard.
Well, this leader, I believe, asked why.
Yeah.
He asked himself why, created space for me to explain why, allowed me that space, but then put the boundaries in and said, okay, I don't have anything to do with that because I wasn't your coach last year. I didn't recruit you. This is the story. If this is what we're talking about, and I have a better understanding of who you are, and I think I know how to coach you better, it was unbelievable for me. It was like somebody just kind of doused me with like sugar and candy and flowers. It was unbelievable. And it didn't really take a lot. I'll never forget it.
Imagine if there was a transfer portal then.
I would have been whatever the maximum number of transfers, that would have been me.
I can imagine. Yeah.
That would have been me.
It's a totally different landscape now.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, we really haven't done justice. You're at Oracle, you're at Rapid7, you're at an LP for Stage 2 Capital. You've been an LP or an operating partner at Bain. You've done incredible things, which we talked about in the bio. But okay, so what are you doing now? How does somebody engage with you? Talk about the mechanics of it. Talk about like they got to bring their A game if they want to try to engage with you. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how somebody can engage.
Thank you. It's really not complicated. I'm very reachable on LinkedIn. Anyone can find me there. And I do one-on-one executive coaching. It's all individualized personal programs. They're typically 6 months to a year. I don't do really short engagements. I found those to be much less harder to measure. And I'll just say it's really results-focused coaching. We do sort of that personal inventory up front. We set goals, we create a plan, and then we measure the results against that plan. Because sometimes coaching can turn into venting, which is really not, I think, what anybody finds a good use of time. And in my case, I'm really looking for people who want to stretch and grow and knock down some of these things that are in their way. I really love working with sales executives, female sales executives who I feel like we have a really strong understanding of each other. And then, people who are recently promoted, that's when I engaged my coach. I went from sales manager to director, and I thought, oh my God, I'm out way far over my skis. I'm managing managers. That's a new muscle. I think coaching can be really effective then. And then very senior executives who are managing board expectations or making very strategic decisions for their organizations. And so anybody can reach out to me and decide if I'm a good fit and if they want to do this kind of program, just via LinkedIn.
Anything we should think about, like if I'm listening and I want to approach you, like how can I be the most coachable when I come to an environment with you?
I think being honest, here are my challenges. Here's what I'm struggling with. What's interesting for high achievers is it's easy to say everything that's going great. But coaching can really be most effective when it's, I want to do this really hard thing, or this might sound kind of crazy, or I have this really significant challenge. I want to make this really big change, something like that.
I love that, because so many times this is the model. Somebody, an executive, an up-and-coming executive, gets a 360, has a gap, and is assigned a personal coach.
Right.
And
I don't do a lot of work like that, but I can imagine what that's
so
like.
many people I hear are like, that's how they get involved with coaches.
Yeah.
They get assigned a coach. So I love the people out there thinking about, I want to up my game.
Yeah.
Here's the hard one. I'm going to be totally vulnerable.
Yeah.
But
it's all confidential, Cap.
Yeah.
That's one of the greatest things about coaching is it's all confidential. And I'm not judging them. I'm there to help them succeed. I'm not their boss. I'm not their manager. I'm not their friend. I'm not their spouse. I'm not their counselor. I'm not their therapist. It's action oriented, results focused. It's sort of like, how are we, going to train to climb a mountain? How's Lindsey Vonn going to come out of retirement? How's Jason Tatum going to evolve from Duke to the pros? It's really that stretch that seems really big. But when you every week are sort of breaking it down and making it manageable and being really honest about your ideas and your thoughts and how you're doing, it can be so powerful. It's a really inspiring work focus for me. I mean, I think you can probably tell that, but it's just been so fascinating and rewarding to be on this journey with people. There are people I've worked with for 3 years, right? Who just we're on this journey together. It's really fulfilling personally.
Amazing. I know your father's proud. That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. Well done.
Thank you.
Good. Kara Gilbert, thank you very much.
Thank you. Great to be with you both.
Johnny Kaplan, good to see you again. And thanks to everyone for listening to another episode of the Revenue Builders Podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to check us out at forcemanagement.com.